Sometimes when you read your writing, you get confused by a sentence you wrote, or somebody else gets confused by a sentence you wrote. And one of the common culprits of that is the prepositional phrase, or prepositional phrases. So let's take a look at how prepositional phrases might be confusing. And one aspect that can really make prepositional phrases confusing is the fact that they can move just about anywhere in a sentence, right? Say we say the hunter slew the deer with his bow, right? We've got a prepositional phrase in here, with his bow. That phrase could move anywhere in the sentence, right? We could say, with his bow, the hunter slew the deer, which for this sentence might be the best placement, because this literally means that the hunter used his bow to slay the deer, right? But we could also put it in the middle. We could say the hunter, with his bow, slew the deer. And technically this means the hunter had his bow with him when he slew the deer. We might assume that he used it to slay the deer because that makes sense, but it could be confusing in another sentence where it's not so obvious the purpose of the object, right, that he has. You know, if the hunter with his pinky, or not, that'd be stupid, with his hat, let's say the hunter with his hat slew the deer, right? We might say, wait, did he slay the deer with his hat? Because that doesn't make sense, right? If we said with his hat, the hunter slew the deer, though we would actually say, oh, he slew the deer with his hat. That's crazy. But anyway, one more place we could put this, we could say also the hunter slew the deer with his bow. And this one, we might say, oh, that sounds pretty clear, except this is actually a somewhat ambiguous placement for a prepositional phrase, because the thing it might modify that's closest to it is actually the deer, because prepositional phrases essentially modify a noun or pronoun. So the deer is a possible thing for us to attach with his bow to in this sentence. And so somebody might read this and say, wait, the deer had a bow? Which of course seems ridiculous, so we wouldn't interpret it that way. But other sentences, maybe the more possible it is for that to be the case, of that prepositional phrase to be modifying something else, that more easily we can be confused. This one a little bit more possible. I ran over a deer in my pajamas. It's kind of funny, but maybe possible for a deer to be wearing your pajamas, right? So proximity there of in my pajamas might make you think that the deer's wearing your pajamas, right? Whereas might be more clear if that prepositional phrase was at the beginning or something closer to the thing it's modifying, which is I. In my pajamas, I nearly ran over the deer, or over a deer. That would be good, but we can't always do that, because sometimes, say we want the focus of the sentence to really be the hunter, and depending on our sentence, maybe starting the sentence with his bow, maybe it distracts us a little bit from the focus we want of our sentence. So anyway, but that's why prepositional phrases can cause confusion, because they can move anywhere in the sentence. And a simple sentence like this one, the hunter slew the deer with his bow, isn't really going to confuse anyone. A general rule of thumb is if you have one to two prepositional phrases in a sentence, it's not going to be confusing usually. If you have 3 in your sentence, well, maybe you want to check it and make sure it's understandable. But once you get 4 or more, it gets crazy, and it's really hard for the reader to track what is modifying what, because those phrases can move around anywhere and still make sense. Like if we said the captain of the guard at the gate, right? So far we're like, okay, the captain of the guard, that makes sense. He's at the gate, right? Where's that gate? Well, that gate, what gate is it? It's the gate of the fortress. So we use that prepositional phrase to say which gate it is. And where is that fortress? Well, it's near the river. And let's see, so the captain of the guard called who? Called for the men. Who? What men? The men from the village. And they were the ones with the torches. So look at all these prepositional phrases with the torches. Oh, we gotta underline them, even if that's dumb. The men with the torches, men from the village, for the men, right, near the river, of the fortress, at the gate, of the guard. This sentence is just really hard for our brain to handle because of the way prepositional phrases work. The captain of the guard at the gate of the fortress near the river called for the men from the village with the torches, right? It's just a mess. So, what's nice though is prepositional phrases aren't our only option when we're writing things, right? So if we're getting a lot of prepositional phrases in a sentence, what we want to do is eliminate them because they're functioning like they can function like adverbs, right? They can function like compound nouns or possessives. We can replace a prepositional phrase with a strong verb instead. So let me give you some examples of that, right? Let's go with, say, a strong verb. So say we say, we're good now. The knight went across the bridge. Let's make this big. So we have a prepositional phrase, across the bridge, right? Well, we could write this sentence without a prepositional phrase because we have a strong verb option, right? We can just say the knight crossed the bridge. Strong verbs are great. Anytime you have a verb that combines not just what they did, but also with how they did it, right? We love those. We want to use those if they fit our writing, right? Or what about prepositional phrase for replacing a possessive, right? Let's say we say the knight. I'll just delete those. Let's say we say the knight put his hand on the hilt of his sword, right? Let's see. Well, with this one, we can use a strong verb instead to shorten this. Instead of the knight putting his hand on the hilt of his sword, we just have a couple of prepositional phrases here. We can get rid of one. We can just replace this with the strong verb gripped. Gripped implies his hand, right? So we just gripped the hilt of his sword, right? Yeah, oh wait, I was going to do possessive, right? Let's see, what if we said the knight put his hand on the hilt of his sword, oh wait, sorry, the sword of his father. So like maybe the previous sentence, the knight put his hand on the hilt of the sword, that's not a big deal, that doesn't confuse us at all. But maybe this one would confuse us more because now we've got like 3 prepositional phrases, right, instead of just 2 prepositional phrases, right? We have on the hilt of the sword of his father, right? Well, nice thing is we can easily wordsmith this a little bit. We'd say the knight. Well, we can go with stronger, that's better, right? Gripped the hilt of his his father's sword. So instead of saying of his father, we just use a possessive. We say his father's sword. Right, so now we're down to one prepositional phrase where we had three, and it's a better sentence. It's much easier to understand. And sometimes prepositional phrases too can be replaced by a kind of an adjective noun combination or compound noun combination. To give you just a brief example, right? Let's say we talk about the trail of the mountains, or the trail, that sounds dumb, trail through the mountains. Well, instead of that, we could potentially say the mountain trail, right? And that's the same thing. In some fewer words, we don't need the prepositional phrase. So let's just do one big confusing sentence that has a lot of prepositional phrases. And let's pick a fun color. Green, orange. Nobody loves orange. My son loves orange. Alright. Say we have a sentence. The captain of the guard walked with haste through the gate of the fortress into the hall of the king with a look of suspicion. Maybe all these prepositional phrases seem great to us and we like them when we write it, but then later we read this sentence and it gets cumbersome, confusing, or maybe we have an alpha reader that complains about it and says, I hate your sentence, it's confusing. So we can change a lot of things in here, right? Instead of saying the captain of the guard, we could say the guard captain. But maybe captain of the guard is a title and we really want to hold on to that one. So we say, okay, I'm prioritizing this prepositional phrase, the captain of the guard. Oops, the captain of the guard. Walked with haste. Well, there's lots of verbs for movement, so we could easily come up with a strong verb instead of walked with haste. We can just say hurried or something like that, right? The captain of the guard hurried through the gate of the fortress. Maybe we want to keep through, right? But now we've got of the fortress right after that. So let's say through the fortress gate. We'll just use a compound noun thing instead of prepositional phrase. Through the fortress gate into the, let's say instead of hall of the king, we can say the king's hall, right? If that works for us. And then instead of saying with a look of suspicion, maybe we can say that differently. Maybe we can use like a participial phrase or something like eyeing the room suspiciously. So we're just pulling into our creativity, right? Coming up with a different way to express something that doesn't have us using a prepositional phrase. And it works better. The captain of the guard hurried through the fortress gate into the king's hall, eyeing the room suspiciously. Much more clear than the captain of the guard walked with haste through the gate of the fortress into the hall of the king with a look of suspicion. So again, let's just emphasize that prepositional phrases can make your sentences confusing. So if you have 1 to 2 in your sentence, you're good, right? That's okay. You get to 3, it's like, probably all right, right? But check. Better make sure that sentence is articulated well. But you get to 4 plus, it's like, uh-oh, rewrite awful sentence. Right, we don't want those. Okay. Alright, hope you enjoyed this video. like and subscribe. That's what people say, right? When you watch their videos, like and subscribe. Anyway, doing this for fun for you.